Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a very special breakdown. My own take of putting the StarCraft units into a tier list. And I just want to be upfront with you all. I have a very strong Zerg bias, and I think Zerg is the most handsome and the best. So, what you're about to see, what you're about to hear, you may disagree with, and you are free to express your disagreements in great detail. I'm doing this as preparation for the Pylon show tomorrow, where we're going to bicker and argue incessantly about which tiers these units belong in. So, without further ado, let's begin. There's the S tier, which is the best, the A tier, which is the second best, the B tier, which is middle of the road, C tier is below average, and D tier is the worst tier. Let's just do the easy ones that make sense. Warp Prism is an S tier unit. You can teleport units all the way across the map to this bad boy. Many games are won with this unit and then warps. It's easy S tier. Archon is also an S tier unit. It deals bonus damage to all Zerg stuff. It's very ouch for us. It scales well with upgrades, and it's very easy to use. The only problem with this unit is sometimes it's too large to fit through a doorway, but that's the only downside we've discovered so far. The carrier is also an S tier unit here. Kind of goes without saying. Many people believe this unit is currently overpowered. The Broodlord, oh my gosh. The Broodlord was once a S tier unit in Wings of Liberty when Infestors were good. But Infestors got nerfed, so this unit sucks, and the units that support it also got nerfed. One of the nerfs to the Broodlord was the range upgrade. These used to do better against Terran, especially Terran mech, but now Thors are just like a hard counter to them. You need an absurd number of Broodlords that, what the heck is the Terran even been doing if you have enough money to make 15 plus? But in any case, the Broodlord is a unit that I love, but it's not good. The Hydrolisk, we'll put it above D tier into C tier because it has pretty good utility versus Bioterran, but that's basically the only area where it really shines. The Hydra has had long stretches of time where it was really, really strong. You could do like a 50 worker Hydraling all in against Protoss and just destroy them. So like Roach Hydra was how I first got to GM back in Heart of the Swarm. It's a good unit. It used to be an amazing unit. Now it's just so countered by Protoss, and against Zerg, you have to be really careful about making Hydras, because if they just mass Ravagers, they can just bile them down. Baneling is an S tier unit. It's just really good for its value. It has a lot of uses in all three matchups. The Tempest is garbage. Tempests are actually made of paper mache. A Tempest will actually lose to a Corruptor in a 1v1. And there have even been reports of Tempest losing to Hydras 1v1. And I even saw a Zergling jump kick and kill a Tempest. So this unit, it shoots pretty good and pretty far, but it's so fragile that it's just terrible. Mothership, we'll put it at a C tier. It's pretty annoying if they have a really strong army and they can protect it, but you can abduct and kill this. It's a really big target. I think that's one of the downsides of the Mothership. It cloaks everything around it, and you can recall stuff, but it's pretty easy to pin down and kill. Ravager is an S tier unit. Lots of utility in all three matchups. Hits both air and ground. Does well against buildings. That's pretty cool. What in God's name is this? Is this the Disruptor? It doesn't even look like a Disruptor. Disruptor is an A tier unit. It's really heartbreaking whenever it kills huge chunks of army. It's fun to watch for tournaments and stuff. It's countered by Ling, so it's not like a unit that you can't do anything about, like the carrier. Void Ray is an S tier unit. They nerfed the build time and the cost of it, but it's still just as strong as it was before. Zealot is an S tier unit. Super punch for its value. The Oracle is an S tier unit. It provides detection, harass, delay, defense, invis detection. It's a pretty skill-based unit though too, so if it's like an F2 Protoss, they're going to be kind of sloppy with it. But with the really good Protoss, they'll just kill you with these. High Templars an S tier unit. Their feedback range got buffed to where they can feedback Vipers before Vipers can even cast their spells. So for that reason, Viper will go into A tier. It does good damage against air with Parasitic Bomb, and Blinding Cloud is pretty good, so this is a good unit to mix in as you're getting your Hive Tech. Colossus is B tier. It's pretty good against light, but since it can be attacked by air and ground, it's just the Colossus was better back in the day whenever it dealt flat damage to everything. Now it's more of an anti-light specialist. What is this? Is this the Adept? Adept is an S tier unit. This is a super high skill unit. You can spam Adepts in the early game and deal a lot of damage and worker kills. You have the decision making of if you shade or if you cancel your shade. So yeah, really strong unit. Maybe a higher skill unit than some other units. Ghost is easily an S tier unit. Holy shit, it counters all of the Zergs late game. It's incredible. Zerg has to tech back down to tier 1 as a result. We have the worker units here. Huh, interesting. Observer, we'll put it as a B tier unit. It's nice, it's invisible, but it doesn't hurt anybody. The Overseer as well. The Phoenix is a C tier unit now. I think it's fine. It's just the Void Ray is so busted and it does similar stuff that, yeah, why would you build a Phoenix when you can make Void Rays? Banshee is an A tier unit. It can be countered, but it's just like a really unexploitable unit for Terran to make in the early game to defend like 3cc or to be aggressive. Cyclone is an A tier unit as well. They're really oppressive in the mid game. In the late game, they're not super great because they don't really scale with upgrades that well. Battle Cruiser, it's probably an A tier unit. They feel kind of clunky. They are pretty annoying to deal with, but if you get Corruptors with upgrades and stuff, you can handle them. The Queen is an S tier unit. The Thor is an S tier unit. The Queen is just like what the Hydra does, but better in every way. They can even transfuse on creep. And they can inject bases and spread creep. It's kind of a pity how they massacred the Hydra, but yeah, a lot of times you just smash Queens instead of Hydras against air. There's a drone, a probe, and an SCV. Ultras, oh my gosh. Good golly gracious. Man, this was another unit that used to be a god tier unit. And this was a little bit before a key discovery, which was that Terrans can rapid fire snipe. Before rapid fire snipe was like known by Diamond Plus Terrans, the Ultra was a pretty terrifying unit. There were a lot of matches in ZVT that I remember, which were all about if the Zerg gets Ultras with Chitinous, they win. And if they don't, they lose. And it was like Terran was always trying to hit a really strong 2-2 timing because they desperately didn't want to fight against Ultras. That was, I think, when Chitinous gave an additional armor point beyond what it gives now. They gave the Ultras a speed upgrade, which is nice, but the thing that I've been asking for, and I think some other people agree, there haven't been that many people who disagree with this, give the Ultras unit walking with some stuff, because they're really clunky to use. There are a bunch of rocks on the map and things like that. It would be cool if Ultras and Hydras and Queens and Lings and stuff could all unit walk with each other. Nah, the Sentry was an S tier unit back in HOTS, but then the Ravager was invented. We'll put it in B tier. The Guardian Shield ability is still good. You can still do force field stuff. The Viking is an A tier unit, mainly because if you're stream cheating off of a Zerg, you can go hunt all their overlords with it. And it's just a nice map control piece early on, and they have pretty good value just as air units. They're kind of like Corruptors for Terran. They can do ground harass, but it's not actually good. Oh my gosh, the poor Infestor. The Infestor used to be an S tier unit, and they hit it with the Nerf bat so many times, they just bonked it all the way down to D tier. It used to have instant fungal. Like whenever you cast the fungal ability, the infestor would cast the fungal ability and the target would be fungal instantly. But then they nerfed that to be a projectile. And then they increased the radius, but then it no longer roots. It used to be a hard root. And one of the coolest moments that you could have would be if you have a opponent army that's like going up a ramp and they're all clumped up, you could fungal once, and if you fungaled like a huge chunk of the army, you could chain fungal and kill everything. It was really hype, really fun for the Zerg who had the infestors, but probably unfun for the opponent in that situation. They added Microbial Shroud, which many people have considered to be a mistake, but it does have a little bit of utility. If you're doing a push, you can Microbial Shroud as a way of saying, hey, Psystorm here, or hey, Disruptor Shot here. That way the Protoss player knows in the orange goop, that's where they need to shoot their AoE so they can kill you. They used to have Infested Terrans, which were really good. The Immortal is an S tier unit, just super duper good value. Anti-armor stuff. The Lurker is one of our S tier units for Zerg. It's really good DPS. It doesn't do anything against air, obviously, but it pretty much does everything that the Broodlord does, but better. The Swarm Host is a C tier unit. There are situations where the Swarm Host is pretty good, like against mech, and they can be a part of a max out, but there are also situations where they don't have enough impact over time, and if an opponent sees you going Swarm Host, they can just go kill you and end the game. We'll put Corruptors on the A tier. They're not good. Let's put them on the B tier. They're not good, but you have to make them. They're kind of like Sky Roaches, but they don't have as much micro potential. Window memes, dear God. This is such a crazy unit. Because its damage is spell damage. They do really well against Ultras, which feels wrong. But because their damage isn't affected by armor, they still get really good damage in the early, mid, and late game. And they're just one of the most punishing units for mistakes. You can just put a bunch of them on the map, just spread them out, kind of set it and forget them. And if your opponent is moving around, the chances of them taking bad trades due to not pre-splitting their units is extremely high. Marine is an S tier unit. Marauder is an A tier unit. It's pretty good with concussive shells and stuff, which doesn't affect ultras. They're really good at trading against banelings. They're going to out DPS and beat up roaches easily. They do fine against Ravagers. If they have Medivac support, Marine Marauder Medivac is pretty classic. DTs, I think Terran players would rate DTs higher, but for Zerg, we don't really face DTs that much in the current meta. I'll put them at B tier. They're okay. Reaper I would also say is B tier. It used to be an S tier unit. You could actually win BlizzCon with only this unit. And they were like, enough's enough. We need to nerf this unit. Bjorn was going 3 racks Reaper against Dark pretty much every game. Pretty crazy times. Zergling is an S tier unit. What is this? Siege tank? I'll say it's an A tier unit. You can spam this a lot. Obviously, it's not going to do anything against air. Really good anti-ground damage. Oh my gosh, the poor Stalker. The Stalker used to be a lot better. I think it was just a bunch of stuff got buffed around the Stalker that by comparison it's not as good. I don't think they nerfed it, but it's pretty micro dependent if you want to get full value from it. Again, this might be another unit that maybe Terran players rate as being higher tier than it actually is because they died of blink all-ins. SCV is an S tier unit. Is this the Mule? I can't even see what that is. The Raven. It's a C tier unit, maybe a B tier unit. It certainly has its uses. You've got detection, which against Zerg, almost no one makes a Raven to clear creep. It can disable caster units, mechanical units or something, and it can drop a little missile turret thing. These used to be meta. I don't know what happened. Why is SCV S tier? because they mine a bunch of resources and they can repair stuff. Repairing things is really clutch. It's a really key way of getting oodles of value from units like the battlecruiser, and that's one of the main reasons that Terran can be super efficient with their units lost, is they trade part of a mechanical unit and then send it home and then fix it up, and you never killed it and it shows back up with full HP. Zerg has to commit time to just heal over time, or transfuses to heal it. Protoss can only do their shields, but STVs can repair things all the way back to full. They can also be lifted into command centers. They can also go into bunkers. They can also be carried in a Medivac. All the workers are at S tier. Workers are super important. If you want to get good at the game, you need to make more workers. That's the most important unit. All 3 workers should be in S tier by default. Medivac is also an S tier unit. They allow Terran to make ridiculous plays. It's just one of the most iconic and crucial units for Terran's mobility on the map. The Hellbat, it's a B tier unit. It's slow. You can just pull workers away from it, which is nice. So if you see a big Hellbat all in coming at your 3rd base as a Zerg or something, you can just yeet all your drones to the natural, take care of the fight at the 3rd, and then send them back. Hellions I would put at A tier. They are hard countered by some stuff like Ultras and Roaches, and Banes and stuff just don't give a fuck. But against Lings, Hellions are super duper good, and against drones as well. Liberator I would put at A tier. Not really for direct fighting, though they are pretty good for zoning things out with their anti-ground for pushes, but just how ridiculously damaging these units can be if they do maybe some Hellion harass at one base and then they put a Liberator in one of your worker lines. The Liberator will kill every single worker that you have if you don't adjust your workers, move your queens. It kills their queen in like 2 hits. We're diluting S tier a little bit. We could be. I could pull some stuff down if we want to negotiate and maybe demote some of these. This is just a first pass. Overlords are pretty cool. I would give them A tier because they give you map vision. They drop creep on stuff and you can drop with them. Mutas. Before Terrans figured out how to like double factory Widow Mine, I liked doing Muta a lot more. It feels like the Zerg player has to play out of their mind good, and the Terran player has to be kind of lazy for Muta plays to work, but just comparing like a Lingbane Hydra compared with a Lingbane Muta. And this is the Roach. I like the Roach. It's pretty good value. Okay, what deserves to be demoted of these? I think we can pull the Sentry down. It's okay. The Colossus is like meh. This doesn't get used that much at all against Zerg. I'm not going to be that knowledgeable about the non-Zerg matchups either. What would I move down from here? Probe Immortal. Maybe the Archon. It does feel like you can deal with Archons eventually. I don't think the Disruptor should be A tier. It's B tier. Let's move this one down. The Ghost is definitely S tier. High Templar also. The Oracle, this is like a pro level. It's S tier, but below the pro level, it's actually a kind of a bad unit. Especially if you're an F2 person. Zealots feel really strong to me. Yeah, maybe for your average player, this could be moved down. The Viking probably isn't A tier. It's kind of like a Corruptor. It's a little bit boring. Doesn't really do a ton. Yeah, I'll move the Oracle down one. I think the Ling is definitely S. Do you think the Void Ray is not S tier? At the pro level, probably not. For your average ladder buddy, it's very oppressive. Super easy to use. So maybe that could be an A tier. A reason to move it to A tier. Maybe the Marauder is a B tier unit. It doesn't feel super scary. It just feels like if you don't have enough stuff, then they can bully you. But it's not like, oh no, they started making Marauders. What do we do? It's like, yeah, it's a Bioterran. I think I like this for the most part. I'm not seeing anything that's really jumping out at me as way worse than the tier that I put it in. Thor S tier? Yes. Just for a late game thing, especially for mech, 3/3 Thors. In a lot of cases, it's not that good. So you could argue that it's A tier because you don't really want to mix them in if you're playing bio. It's like a mech specific thing. Part of this is just the memory of all my broodlords that have been killed by Thors in like stupid trades. 10 broodlords, 4 Thors. My broodlords are all dead. Just those memories. That's why I put it up at S tier. So partially this tier list is me venting a little bit for myself. Can you talk a little bit why Immortal is S tier? It's just stupid good value versus armored. And a lot of Zerg stuff is armored. The buildings are armored. Roaches are armored. Nobody makes ultras against Protoss, but those are also armored. They have a little barrier shield, which allows them to absorb some damage on a cooldown. So you can like go in, basically how Protoss Ground wants to trade is they want to go in with their Zealot, Archon, Immortal, whatever stuff that they have, go in, trade out the Zealots, but keep the gas units. And Immortals are really good at going in and they take a bunch of hits and then Protoss can retreat and their shields recharge. They have pretty chonky shields too. So Immortals just feel like super good value as a ground unit. You think you'd demote carriers? Why? Carriers are extremely good. They have absurd range. Their DPS is off the charts. They fly. They're one of the easiest units to micro. And they synergize with the other Protoss units that are easy to micro. Carrier, High Templar, Archon. Maybe with some disruptors or something. Maybe some voids for some flavor. The Zealot being S, I think, is fair. It's a really good unit. Just feels about right. Carriers are too expensive, takes too much time, too hard to get to. I don't know about that. Did you send Adepts at the opponent's base? Baneling and B? No, Baneling is S tier. Scarlet is here. Would you say Baneling is that good? Is Baneling S tier? This is an alphabetical list? No, it's not. You're curious about Banshee at A? Banshee is a pretty high skill unit because it's fragile, but a really good Terran player knows how to find like those small nooks and crannies in your base. Like if your Spore isn't giving full coverage of a base, they'll put 2 Banshees on hold position and they'll just deny half your mineral line, or they'll kind of bait out a Queen and they'll focus it down. And the Banshee also defends pretty much all the Zerg's ground all-ins early on. So it allows the Zerg to be, or sorry, it allows the Terran to be greedy early on just by making 2 Banshees. 2 Banshees plus Hellions and you're safe with your macro. Adepts A tier? No, Adepts are certainly S tier. Adepts are so S tier that I can face a Protoss player who's higher skill than me and they can just kill me with Adepts every single game and I can't do anything about it because they're that good with the unit. The unit has that much skill and nuance to it. Because you have the decision making of where the Adept shows up. Does the Adept commit to that base or does it shade to the other base? You've got juke potential. It's a really cool unit. How much of Ravager S is Biles? The Ravager is super busted for a lot of reasons. One of them is Corrosive Bile. Corrosive Bile is high damage and it doesn't require upgrades. So you just get a huge damage thing early on. And then it also doesn't have a armor tag. It's neither light nor armored, which means that Immortals don't deal bonus damage to it, and Colossi don't deal bonus damage to it. It can also break force fields with Corrosive Bile. It can also hit air units with Corrosive Bile. It can also hit buildings with Corrosive Bile, which can't dodge. The Ravager is so strong that that's a big part of why Hydra, like Roach Hydra stuff, isn't as popular in ZVZ, is because Ravagers come online with no upgrades required. The Hydra requires 2 upgrades to be online and is pretty upgrade dependent since all of their DPS comes from their regular auto attack, whereas the Ravager, they have their regular auto attack, but then the Corrosive Bile is damage potential on top of that. You think Hydra D tier? Isn't it pretty good against Bio? If you have a Ling Bane with it? Ravager, well, you can use Ultras to break force fields, but in the late game, usually force fields aren't really a factor. The supply on Ravagers is so heavy. It's only 3. You get a lot for a Ravager for 3 supply. You get range. More range than a Roach. It has 6 range instead of 4. You get faster weapon speed than a Roach. You get Corrosive Bile. And in a weird way, they're more tanky against certain stuff because they're not flagged with light or armored. You're going to screenshot Scarlet saying the only reason you build Hydra is because it can damage air and go into Lurker after. Yeah, it's not a super good direct fighting unit. It's just really squishy. Isn't this the same reason to go for Stalkers? No, Stalkers don't turn into Lurkers. Where's Nidus? This isn't buildings. This is units only. Yeah, I can see the argument for Hydras being bumped down. The only time I really feel decent about building them is when I'm surviving in the mid game against Bio. Against Mech, when I make Hydras, it just always feels like a mistake. But you used to go Roach Hydra Viper against Terran a lot back in HOTS. It's just Mech got some big buffs. Stalkers are worse than Hydras. You can all-in Terrans with this unit, no? Maybe the Stalker is a D tier unit. I just feel for the Terrans who die to it. And it's a pretty core unit in PvP, right? So it's sort of the Roach. It's like the Roach of PvP. It's the unit that people have to make, not because they want to make it, but because it can deal with the stuff that people are throwing around. I think I like this. Stalker does start with S. Yeah, Lingbane definitely S tier. Window memes definitely S tier. I'm curious to see how the other people's guides will, or their tier lists will differ from mine. You can see the Zerg bias here because I have 4 out of 5 of the D tier units are Zerg units. But I doubt that would be the case for people who are not Zerg mains. They might do something different. Or maybe Zerg is just the faction that has the most broken and the worst units. And the other 2 are more balanced. Who knows? But tune in at tomorrow, Pylon Show 1 p.m. Pacific time, and we will debate the shit out of this. We're going to see what is actually broken and what is not. Sal, Neuro, and Fear Dragon. Perfectly balanced. Do you think our friendship will withstand such a thing? I haven't seen Sal and Ravi banter with each other aside from Ravi being in Twitch chat and trying to piss Sal off. So I'm curious to see what it'll be like in voice and video comms. We'll see how that goes. does it creep? You think DT is an A tier? It's just a unit that requires denying stealth, which means that you have to do a bunch of housework to make it successful. Or you have to pray that people forgot their detection. I think at low tier Dota, low tier StarCraft, been playing too much Dota lately. The DT is a very oppressive unit because players don't have a memorized spore timing. Many Zergs, they've just been drilling in like 4-minute spore against Protoss as like a random timing, or if it's you think it's Oracle 335 spore, or if you're playing against Banshee, you get 430 spores. Any stealth unit against a player who has not memorized some timing that they've decided upon, they're going to have a really good chance to deal some massive damage. In low tier Dota, the DT is king. The principle holds, though. I may have misspoke, or maybe I didn't, because also in low tier Dota, people don't know how to buy stealth detection. So if you turn invisible, that means that you're invincible. Yeah. Which, if you think about it another way, means that if you get detection more often, that means you're improving as a player. Think about it. Well, this is my tier list. If you have any hot takes or opinions about why it's dead wrong, I'd be happy to hear that in the chat or in the comments. Thank you. And remember, the game is pretty balanced, and if you lost, you probably got outplayed.